Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Courting Darkness by L.R. Braden, narrated by Heather Costa. Chapter 1. My breath puffed out in angry little clouds as I shivered under the star-streaked sky that stretched above my patch of frozen mountain. Jaw clenched, I shoved a key into the lock on my front door with enough force to jerk the purse off my shoulder. It slid down, snagging at my elbow, and the shift in weight jostled the dome-covered cake, balanced in my other hand. I couldn't believe James had stood me up again. After all his promises. 20 minutes standing outside his house, then a quick call about an unavoidable business at the gallery. Sure, he'd apologized, given me his usual line about making it up to me another time. But another time never seemed to come for James and me. I twisted the keys, those not in the lock dug into my palm. Another time. If he said those words again, I was going to run him over with my Jeep. The door stuck, swollen by moisture. I growled and pushed harder, hissing when my weight settled onto the freshly re-knit muscles of my right leg. I gave the door another shove, and it finally gave way, slamming into the adjoining wall with a bang, my keys still dangling from the lock. I froze in the doorway. My living room was occupied. I'd been looking forward to curling up with my cake and my anger. Habits formed through years of solitude were hard to break, and I still wasn't used to having roommates. Company was going to put a serious crimp in my plans. Kai and Chase were sitting across from each other on my faded furniture, cards and poker chips on the coffee table between them. Neither seemed surprised by my dramatic entrance. "You're home early." Kai glanced in my direction, and his eyes were swirling galaxies of color rather than the deep brown of his glamour. The human disguise he wore less and less these days. He was a fey knight from the realm of enchantment who'd been living in my guest room for about a month, most of which was spent saving the world from a murderer with a magic world-eating box. He cradled a hand of cards to his chest so his opponent couldn't cheat. "Didn't think we'd see you till much later. Or tomorrow," added Chase without looking up. I'd let Chase into my home when I thought he was just a cat, before I knew he was actually a fae who could change form at will. I let him stay because he saved my life. Of course, when I made that deal, the understanding was that he'd remain the gray tabby I'd taken in last summer. But he'd been spending more time with fingers than fur lately. "Call." He dumped a handful of colorful plastic chips onto the pile already on the table. "Yeah, well," I pulled my key out of the door and kicked it closed behind me. "Plans change." Chase glanced up and raised a silver eyebrow over one luminous green eye. "You've replaced James with a cake?" The plastic dome I hugged gave a clear view of the decadent chocolate cake I'd picked up on my way home. "This is my consolation prize." I lifted my chin and carried the calorie-laden confection to the high counter that separated the kitchen from the living room. "Don't judge me." "Let me guess." Chase tossed his long silver braid behind his shoulder, making his pointed, slightly furry ears twitch. "Something came up." "Again," Kai added. He spread his cards on the table. "2 pair." "Full house," Chase said with a grin. He scooped up his winnings. Kai looked over at me. "It's important to know when to fold." I'd been thinking the same thing all the long drive home. I'd done my best with James. I'd really put myself out there. But after all the excuses and conflicting schedules and missed dates, I'd been down this road enough to know where it ended. I'd had my fill of waiting for men who never showed up. Still, I wasn't about to give Kai the satisfaction of an "I told you so." I crossed my arms and dropped onto the couch next to Kai. "That little tip just lost you a piece of cake." His smile went slack. Kai had the biggest sweet tooth I'd ever seen. "You'll get fat if you eat it all on your own." I gestured to Chase, who was stacking his winnings into neat little piles. "Chase can help me." Chase shook his head. "Cats don't eat chocolate." "They don't normally eat pizza either, but that's never stopped you." I accidentally nudged the coffee table with my knee, sending Chase's carefully stacked poker chips cascading across the surface. "Hey, don't get pissy at me just because your old stiff couldn't follow through." "James is not an old stiff," I said. "He's refined. Something you wouldn't understand." He snorted. "Whatever you say." I turned to Kai. Back me up here. Will it earn me some cake? Ha! Roared Chase. Spineless elf. Mangy stray, Kai shot back. Chase took a bow and began to melt, shrinking and shifting until a gray tabby sat on the faded beige cushion of Chase's chair. Sighing, I lifted a blue poker chip and rolled it over my knuckles. What were you betting? Kai tipped his head to one side and frowned. Little bits of colored plastic, obviously. I rolled my eyes and tossed the chip back on the pile. The chips are usually backed by money, but I guess you and Chase aren't exactly rolling in human cash. Actually, I received my first paycheck last week. When Kai made the decision to stick around the mortal realm to instruct me in all things Fae, he also started working part-time at a convenience store, owned by a registered halfer who owed him a favor. The job was dull, but necessary to get a work visa from the PTF, the paranatural task force that policed interactions between humans and Fae, which was the only way a full-blooded Fae could legally stay in the human realm. Congratulations. I've been thinking about what to do with it, though. I hadn't considered rolling in it. I believe humans have a custom of paying a portion of the expense of shared living space, so I thought I might do that. You mean rent? He thrust a finger at me. Exactly. What do I owe you? I lifted one shoulder. On the house. Yes. What do I owe on the house? I rolled my eyes. It means forget about it. I don't need your money. Are we not roommates? Sure, but it's not like this is a permanent arrangement. We haven't even talked about what happens after my trip to court. My breath hitched, as it often did when anyone mentioned my summons to the Fae Court of Enchantment. Kai had convinced the powers that be, namely my long-lost grandfather, that I wasn't ready, hence his new job as my personal tutor. But we had no idea how long the arrangement would last. Maybe I'd never be ready for life among the Fae. He frowned. I still feel I should contribute. How about groceries? Between you and Chase, the fridge is almost always empty. Deal. He thrust out his hand, and I shook it, trying not to laugh at his triumphant expression. Chase, who'd been watching our exchange, perked up at the word groceries. Once the deal was struck, he sprang into my lap and nuzzled his head against my chin. Without thinking, I stroked his back and scratched around his ears. You know that's still Chase, right? Kai watched us with a mixture of amusement and frustration. You shouldn't treat him differently just because he looks like a cat. I shrugged. I can't help it. Kai made a disgusted noise and scooped the cat out of my lap, dropping him unceremoniously to the floor. Chase gave an indignant hiss and sauntered off. If you can't deal with that riffraff, how do you expect to get by at court? I nibbled a piece of loose cuticle and hunched deeper into the sagging couch cushion, wishing for the millionth time that life could go back to the way it was before Kai showed up at my door. Back when I thought I was human. Most halfers, Fae-human hybrids, returned to their regular lives after registering with the PTF. But that wasn't an option for me. Unlike the vast majority of Fae offspring, I wasn't allergic to metal. Hell, it was how I made my living. And according to Kai, there was only one bloodline capable of producing Fae that could handle iron. That was why Kai was still there, why I had to take fairy protocol lessons, and why Uncle Saul, the man who'd raised me since a car crash killed my mom, was doing his best to keep my name off the PTF registry. I rubbed the intricate tattoo that wound its way up my right arm. Learning I was the by-blow of a Fae-human love affair untold generations ago had been a hard pill to swallow. Finding out I was royal had been a kick in the head. I still don't see why I have to go. Your mission was a success. The killer was brought to justice, and Gramps got back his magic death box. Why can't we just leave it at that and all go our merry ways? Kai pinched the bridge of his nose. We've gone over this. There is no going back. The gift my lord gave you to boost your powers also marked you as his bloodkin. There is no hiding who you are now. I could hide just fine if I stayed here, I argued. But parading around a Fae court with the Lord of Enchantment is going to make me pretty damn conspicuous. There was a time I would have been happy to have a long-lost relative come and claim me, as any orphan would, but I held no delusion that he'd found me out of kinship or caring. I was one of only 3 living imbuers, a rare gift. No Fae would pass up his claim to be an imbuer, regardless of how tenuous the connection or how weak the blood of the halfer. Kai rolled his eyes, an expression I was pretty sure he'd picked up from me. You're a member of the court now, like it or not. If you don't go to them, they will eventually come to you, and I guarantee you would not enjoy that experience. In either case, learning our customs and traditions is the best way to protect yourself. Besides, there is no one in this world or any other who can instruct you in the art of imbuing as well as my lord. I crossed my arms, frowning. My abilities are fine the way they are. Truth be told, there was a lot I still had to learn about my powers, and magic in general. But that was the one subject Kai had steadfastly refused to cover. Mostly our sessions consisted of mind-numbing etiquette and history lessons, although he'd recently begun teaching me how to fight with a sword. It's important for you to understand how the Fey world works before you take your place in it. To that end, he picked up an old leather-bound book from a pile on the floor and held it out. A little light reading before bed. Haven't I suffered enough tonight? It's the chronicle of your family tree. I thought you might be interested to see where you came from. I know where I came from, I snapped, but I took the proffered tome just the same. You know less about yourself than anyone I've ever met. What's that supposed to mean? Never mind. He waved his hand as if wiping the words away. I'm turning in. I have an early shift at the store tomorrow. How's that going, by the way? He shrugged. I play tricks on the customers to entertain myself when it's slow. My jaw dropped. If someone reports you, your visa will be revoked. You'll be deported back to the reservation. Don't worry, he grinned. Humans haven't got a clue. I scowled. Don't say I didn't warn you. I woke feeling sluggish and heavy, as though my bones and muscles had turned to jelly in the night. The dusty tome Kai had given me was a weight on my chest. Pages crumpled from its fall. I smoothed the bent corners and pressed the cover flat, running a hand over an embossed coat of arms. A stylized flame sat at the center of an 8-pointed star, crossed with a sword and hammer. My eyelids sagged, but a flash of silver in the pre-dawn light drew my attention. Shifting slightly, I peeked over a mound of crumpled covers to a waterfall of silver hair that stopped just shy of covering the naked butt of the man lying next to me. Chase! I lurched away with a shriek, grabbing the sheets as I tumbled to the floor. Struggling to my knees, I clutched the tangled fabric to my chest and glared over the side of the bed. With a yawn, Chase rolled onto his back and stretched from fingertips to toes. My face became a furnace. What the hell are you doing? I was sleeping. He scratched a hand over his chest, across his abdomen, and I jerked my eyes back to his face. Get out of my bed! You seemed lonely. I thought you could use a little company. Besides, you didn't have any objections last night. He closed his eyes and seemed to doze off again. Bunching my fists into the sheet to stop from strangling him, I counted to 10. Then I grabbed the pillow and yanked it from under his head. What the... I swung the pillow. Get out of my room! Each word was punctuated by a smack from the pillow as he struggled into a sitting position. Stop that! He grabbed my wrist. Get out! What's going on in here? Kai stood in the doorway, rubbing sleep from his kaleidoscope eyes. I looked from Kai, dressed in a pair of Buzz Lightyear pajama pants that hung low on his skinny hips, to Chase, naked in my bed, and wondered, not for the first time, what had happened to the quiet, solitary life I'd enjoyed only a month before. Shaking my head, I gritted my teeth and growled, Everybody out! Chase tugged on my wrist enough to plant a soft kiss on the inside of my arm, then let go with a laugh. He sprang off the bed before I could react, melting and shifting as he sailed through the air, so it was the silent paws of a gray tabby that hit the floor at Kai's feet and bolted out of the room. None of my business, Kai smirked and pulled the door closed. I let out an inarticulate scream of frustration and threw my pillow at the closed door. Then I flopped onto the bed with a groan. Was it too late to revoke the offer to let them stay? 20 minutes later, I sipped steaming tea and watched snowflakes flit through the air from my favorite chair by the front window. Morning had brought with it a flurry of snow, filling the sky with white and blanketing the land in silence. Towering pines and the bare branches of aspens stood sentry around my property, cloaked in winter. The landscape did wonders to soothe my thoughts, as the dim glow of the sun rose above the treetops to brighten the overcast sky. Kai strolled into the living room in loose sweats and a Grateful Dead t-shirt. He headed straight for the dining table, which was covered with books and papers, and clapped his hands. "Ready to review your etiquette?" And I was having such a nice morning. I drained the last of my tea and took my cup to the sink. Weren't we supposed to have sword practice today? Those lessons I actually enjoyed. And unlike knowing the proper depth of a bow to make to a member of the Fae Court depending on their rank in relation to my own, sword skills might actually be useful in the real world. You need to focus more on your weaker areas. You're a terrible swordsman, but you can probably manage not to die long enough for help to arrive. On the other hand, you will almost certainly insult someone important within moments of your arrival at court, and that can be just as deadly. "I'm not that bad at the sword," I pouted. "Not for someone with a week and a half of training," he conceded. "But most Fae have had hundreds of years to practice. By our standards, you're a toddler with a pointy stick and no motor control." "Ouch," he shrugged. "You know I can't lie." "Doesn't mean you have to be so honest," I grumbled. "Look, Kai cut off mid-sentence. His head snapped around and he stared at the front door in wide-eyed horror. "Oh no. What is it?" I sprang to my feet, adrenaline coursing through me. I hadn't heard anything, and there were no cars in sight through the large window that overlooked the front of my property. "Alex," he grabbed me by the shoulders, pulling me to face him. "You need to remember everything I've taught you." "What are you—" A sharp knock sounded against the door, and Kai practically flew across the room to open it, leaving me to stagger after him. Chapter 2. The woman on my porch had pale, papery skin that puckered like fruit left too long in the sun. Her lips were thin, almost invisible, and pulled down in a sharp frown. Drooping blue eyes, as cold and clear as the winter sky, stared from a web of wrinkles. I got the feeling those wrinkles were from perpetual scowling, rather than any amount of laughter. Despite the weight of her years, she stood ramrod straight with her chin high, hands clasped lightly over the rich fabric of a dress from a Renaissance festival. Her silver-white hair was pulled back in a severe bun that left her face exposed. The telltale shimmer of a glamour surrounded her. Refocusing my eyes, I tried to shift my perception the way Kai had taught me. Ever since I'd touched the beautiful, terrible chain that had burned itself into my flesh as an intricate tattoo, the few drops of Fae blood in my veins had been amplified enough to peek through basic Fae glamours, but the illusion of an old human lady remained firmly in place. Kai had swung the door wide open and stood to the side with his eyes on the floor. From the line of his jaw and the tension in his neck, it was safe to assume this was not someone he was happy to see. "Hello," I said, taking a step forward. "Can I help you?" The woman stepped fully into the room, leaving Kai to close the door behind her. Without even acknowledging my presence, she turned a slow circle, taking in the worn, mismatched furniture, the scratched desk in the corner where my computer sat, the cheap knickknacks cluttering my shelves, and the half-eaten chocolate cake sitting on the counter. When her circuit was complete, her gaze settled on me, judging. I tried not to shrink under the weight of that stare. "Honored tutor," Kai kept his head bowed as he spoke, and some distant part of my brain registered the angle as significant. "May I present the Lady Alessandra Catherine Blackwood." It was the first time Kai had ever used my full name, and it made me shudder. I felt like something had been surrendered, something that should have been kept secret. In one of our endless lessons, Kai had explained that the Fae had a sort of naming ceremony when they came of age. It wasn't a specific age, but rather a stage of life, puberty for immortals. During that ceremony, they went off alone to complete some kind of trial. Some children never came back from those trials, and some came back broken. But those who passed came back with a name. A secret name that only they knew, and if they were wise, it stayed that way. The Fae were protective of their names, as the true name of a Fae was a powerful thing. My name had been many things, a prison, an honor, a rebellion, an endearment, but it had never felt like a danger before now. The woman bowed, a rigid, stiff-backed bend that brought her forehead even with my chin. "Milady." Hi," I gave a little finger wave. Kai cringed, so I tried again. Since lady seemed like a higher rank than tutor, I inclined my chin by a fraction. Whether that was the correct response or not, the tutor took it as a sign to rise from her bow. "You may address me as Hortense," she said in a voice like dust, dry and little used. "And you can call me Alex," I said. She pursed her lips and paced a slow circle around me. The hairs on the back of my neck began to itch, but Kai was pleading with wide eyes, so I clenched my fists and stood as still as I could while Hortense made her inspection. When she stood in front of me again, she lifted her chin. "I have been sent by the Lord of Enchantment. The date of your court appearance has been set." The words were a punch to the gut. I'd known this was coming, just not so soon. I took a steadying breath and let out a laugh that shook too much to sound real. "You make it sound like I'm on trial." "An apt description. You shall attend the winter festival." "That's only a few weeks away. She can't." Kai stepped forward, but dropped his gaze when Hortense shot him a look. She turned back to me. "I am here to assess your readiness." "Incorrect!" Hortense snapped the word before I'd even finished my sentence. "Let us try an easy one. List the Fey courts." I took a deep breath and tried to concentrate. "There's enchantment, obviously. Then there's the Court of Illusions, the Airy, Shadows, Shifters, and Elementals. There's an underwater court, but I forget the name of that one. Oh, and the Demon Court." "No!" She slapped her hands down on the scarred surface of my dining table. I hadn't thought her frown could get any deeper, but looking at the sharp curve of her lips made my face hurt. "Have you learned nothing?" I snapped my mouth closed on my first response, took a deep breath, and asked, "What did I miss?" "Aside from the fact that you forgot the name of the Undine and left the High Court out entirely, there is no demon court. That would imply demons are Fey, which they are not. They exist entirely in a non-corporeal state in the Rift, the realm of chaos, unless a mortal is foolish enough to give them possession of a body. Including them in the list of Fey courts is a great insult." "Give me a break." I pushed my hands through the frizz of my unbrushed hair. "I didn't know there was going to be a quiz today, and we've already been at it for nearly 3 hours. My ass was numb, my back was stiff, and I hadn't gotten my shower. I stretched my arms overhead and my shoulders popped in testimony to my discomfort. "I need to get ready for work soon. How many more questions have you got?" Hortense scowled. "Your impatience is unbecoming of a lady of the court. It draws attention to your very mortal sensibilities and shortcomings." I bristled at the way she said mortal, like what she really wanted to say was disgusting or pathetic. "I don't consider being on time to my prior commitments a shortcoming. If you wanted my undivided attention, you should have made an appointment." She pulled her shoulders back and seemed to grow an extra inch despite her already perfect posture. "You are outspoken, impatient, and ignorant." "You're pompous, stuck up, and condescending," I countered. Then I closed my eyes, wishing I could take the words back. Despite the way her holier-than-thou attitude set my teeth on edge, pissing off my grandfather's messenger was counterproductive. Kai groaned behind me. Hortense had insisted he remain in the room, but outside my field of vision. Guess she didn't want him sneaking me the answers to her endless questions. So far, I'd been asked to recite the lineage of all the major families of the Court of Enchantment, name the Fey realms, the lords that ruled them, and the species most often found there, the meaning behind every type of flower and their herbal properties, the differences in the schools of magic, and the traditional ceremonies for a number of special occasions, ranging from solstices to coronations. After nearly 3 hours of falling short on every one of her questions, I was tired, cranky, and ready to kick her out on her arrogant butt. Looking over my head, Hortense addressed Kai directly for the first time since she'd ordered him to bring in her bags. "This child is in no way prepared for life at court. You have failed your mission." "Lay off." I set my palms flat on the table and stood. "It's not Kai's fault I'm a lousy student." "It's all right, Alex." Kai touched my arm. "The tutor is right. I have failed you." I shook my head. "No, she isn't. You're doing fine. No one could have taught me all that stuff in such a short amount of time." "I will report my findings to the Lord," Hortense continued. Given the circumstances, I should be very surprised if you were allowed to remain at your current post." "I understand." Kai bowed his head. Growling at the way Kai groveled to this jerk, I smacked him on the arm, hard. "Knock it off!" He flinched, but didn't straighten. Hortense cleared her throat. "These are for you." She pointed to the trunk Kai had carried in. The inside was full of books, scrolls, and piles of loose papers. "You will memorize the information stored here before I return." I looked at her blankly. "You're coming back?" "Of course," she said. "Someone must ensure you are prepared for court." "That's Kai's job." "It was." She straightened a few papers strewn across the table and took a sip from the water Kai had set out when we moved into the dining area. "I shouldn't be surprised if the Lord redeploys me as soon as he receives my report. You obviously require firmer guidance than this knight is capable of providing." My fingers curled. "You have no right to show up out of the blue and make judgments like that." She set her glass down. "I have every right, and if the knight had done his duty, you would already be aware of that. I don't know how he convinced the Lord to let him try in the first place, but he is in no way capable of filling this role of tutor." I crossed my arms. "If you think I'm going to let you take his place, you're dead wrong." The tutor's brow furrowed. "Why would you refuse the service of those most qualified to assist you?" "I don't like you." She blinked. "What has that to do with it?" "Just make sure that when you give your report, you tell him I'm against having anyone else sent here. If Gramps wants me trained, Kai is the man for the job." She tilted her head like a bird eyeing a worm. "Even if it costs you your life?" "I trust him, which is more than I can say about you." Hortense was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Very well," turned and walked out of the house. I stomped over and slammed the door on the swirl of frost that blew across my empty porch and the unbroken field of snow beyond. "You shouldn't have done that." Kai plucked at the hem of his Guardians of the Galaxy shirt. "You'd be better off with a real tutor." "What's with you? You really think I want to spend time with that jerk?" He ran his hands through his hair, and the frustration and anger he'd been keeping in check all morning came bubbling to the surface. "That's not the point." "I'm sorry I failed her test, but I wasn't ready for it." "That's the problem, Alex." The disappointment in his voice twisted my insides. Disappointment and something else. He believed what Hortense had said. He thought he was a failure. But I'd been the one to fail. He shook his head. "The point is moot anyway. The decision is out of our hands." I swallowed the dry lump in my throat. "Do you think Gramps will fire you?" He gave a weak smile. "I don't know." I bit my lower lip. I was just starting to get used to having Kai around. Sure, it was weird having someone in my space, but it was also kinda nice to have someone besides myself to talk to. "The tutor will certainly argue for my dismissal," he said. "But you gave her a pretty interesting message to deliver. I honestly don't know how the Lord will take it." "You think she'll actually tell him what I said?" "Of course. She's duty-bound to do so." "What do you mean?" "While instructing or testing you as a tutor to a pupil, she is afforded special privileges. However, you are a lady of the court. Your station is above hers. She would not dare ignore or circumvent your order. She'll deliver the message exactly as you phrased it." I pictured Hortense repeating my words verbatim to a regal old fae on a throne, and frowned. Not the most eloquent speech, but done was done. Nothing I could do about it now. "So when exactly is the Winter Festival?" I asked. "Sooner than I'd like." Kai rubbed a hand over the back of his neck. "The festival corresponds roughly with the winter solstice here in the mortal realm. But since time moves a little differently in the Fey realms, it's not a perfect match." In one of our endless lessons, Kai had mentioned that each realm had a slightly different time flow. If I remembered correctly, Enchantment's was a little slower than Earth's, so more time passed here than there. "Now," Kai started pulling books and scrolls out of Hortense's trunk. "Shall we see what she's left you?" I eyed the seat I'd spent most of the morning squirming in, and the aches in my back and neck flared. The last thing I wanted was another hour in that chair, while Kai tried to jam more fairy knowledge into my head. But I had 2 hours before I was due at the bookstore, and with my meeting with the Lord of Enchantment looming over me, I didn't have time to waste. Sighing, I settled back at the table and reached for the first book.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?